Uh, Today's talk, you know, about that thing that can't be talked about. Yeah. So we didn't. Not a big fan of the term enlightenment. Um, so we're going to talk about awakeness. And another great term for awakeness, which has a lot of valuable insight for a seeker, is the natural state. What's great about the natural state? It's natural. It's what is completely natural to us. And it's always there. It's always here. And it tends to be obscured. We tend to not feel it or experience it in a really palpable, direct way because because we've got this other neurotic thing happening. And it's not even that the two are totally incompatible, right? We could be very awake, be in touch with ourselves, and still have this neurotic thing, this little little self-obsessed, grandiose, and at the same time very small and insignificant and put upon thing happening. They could be happening at the same time. And how much we identify with the neurotic thing. We're going to call it the neurotic thing today. How much we identify with that neurotic thing. How much significance we give it. It's kind of what makes the difference between experiencing and feeling awake and feeling small, feeling not awake, feeling disturbed, diseased, or or if we've caught it on its upswing, you know, puffed up and grandiose, right? And I think we all have some experience of this, right? Um, we've all probably caught ourselves at some point, caught a glimpse, a perspective of our neurotic thing, and just laughed at how absolutely absurd it is. You know, it's the thing which, you know, 1 minute, you know, it's poor me, I am the victim of the world, and the next minute is going to be president of the United States and solve everybody else's problems, right? And when we kind of step out of it for a moment like that, and really see it for what it is, and maybe have a good laugh at it, all of a sudden we're not caught in it. And so the process that's, you know, unfolding after awakening is that neurotic self tends to come with a lot of baggage. And some of that baggage is more significant than other baggage. Right, we've all been conditioned in all kinds of ways. And we will be undoing and bumping into our conditioning for the rest of our lives, as long as we're above ground and not below ground. We will be experiencing life to some degree through our conditioning. And some conditioning has a kind of greater gravitational strength than other conditioning. It's got a greater ability to hook us in. This is going to be a terrible example, right? Wow, it's going to be really bad. So I have a slight preference for mint chocolate chip ice cream over chocolate ice cream. You know, if I'm given the choice, like I'm definitely if choice is not a factor, I'm going to eat them both because I love me some sugar. And if I had to choose, if you put a gun to my head and I had to choose between mint chocolate chip and chocolate, I'm going to choose mint chocolate. And now let's say, so it's a preference because there's not a lot of emotional baggage there for me. But let's say I had a really bad experience with chocolate ice cream in my childhood. I was shamed. The whole class made fun of me for choosing chocolate, and that memory, that feeling, are just really burned in deep to my consciousness. And I also had a really pleasant experience with, mint chocolate chip. Just like a peak experience. I was being held by my entire family and carried on everyone's shoulders because I just won the soccer game. So all of a sudden there's a lot of emotional, ties to mint chocolate and a lot of aversion to chocolate. So when those two things come up, swirl up into consciousness, now all of a sudden there's like a gravitational force. I'm going to get sucked. I'm going to be in resistance and aversion to chocolate ice cream. And I'm going to strongly prefer mint chocolate. And then, I start to form beliefs. Well, I'm a mint chocolate guy, and I'll never be a chocolate man. Chocolate ice cream is the worst. And people who eat chocolate ice cream, there's something wrong with them. And it all goes back to my experience with chocolate ice cream and not wanting to look at that, to see that. Now it's part of my identity. It's how I know myself. So it's a terrible example. And I can only hope that I will come up with better examples in the future. But it's simple enough, and it's got enough truth in it that that's kind of the what a lot of the material that keeps this neurotic self spinning around, taking up a lot of our attention, keeps it up in the air, keeps it going. And just multiply that terrible example by thousands and thousands and thousands of things, which, we've built an identity around. And identity is, how we know ourselves. And so this neurotic self, seems very, very powerful on the surface. We find ourselves sucked in before we even know what's happening. It just grabs us, and all of a sudden we're gone on some trip. And we've started to lose touch with our natural state, which makes sense. The natural state tends to be pretty quiet. And the neurotic thing is shouting. It's got that gravitational pull thing going. And, well, there may be some kind of gravitational pull to the natural state. It's a much quieter force in some ways. Much, much quieter. It's going to win out in the long run. But in the short run, we may find ourselves falling for that same old trick. And as these stories, beliefs that make up identity, start to come to the surface, be seen through, start to dissolve. We find ourselves less easily. As that neurotic thing gets more and more quiet, there's less and less and less to reference. This is that feeling of falling. This is the experience of being in a void. This is what Buddhism calls no self. And obviously, no self is not not completely accurate. Right? Here I am talking. Definitely seem to be here. Definitely seem to be not you. You're listening. I'm talking. So clearly there's some kind of distinction. And I ain't got no problems saying self and myself and I am. And yet there's so much less there's so much less to self than we think there is, that no self turns out to be a pretty accurate description. Yeah, and it's a pretty great pointer. Because probably what you'll find for a long, long time is you'll find this neurotic self scrambling to put something back together again. It's so terrified in a sense of the sort of vacuum, the void of true self, that it just, wants to fill it up with anything it can. And so you'll see it many, 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 many times trying to do that. Trying to construct a new self, a new identity, in the midst of sort of a pile of ashes. And it's going to do that in all kinds of ways. Some of them really clever, right? Well, now that I've had all these amazing experiences, now I know the truth. And now, now I've got an enlightened self. right? And this enlightened self is going to do X, Y, Z, conquer the world, bring about world peace, and everyone will get along if they just see things as I see them. And so it's it's got that same neurotic undercurrent as you can see in that example. And yeah, so I'm going to talk about what the natural state feels like a little bit. It's for me, very simple, very quiet. And that's where my name comes from. It comes from silence. Not that I go around in life, in most settings, introducing myself as loving silence. And in certain settings, where it's appropriate, I do. It's part of my name. And yeah, okay. Maybe there's something in that example. And so that name came out of silence, sitting, meditation. And here's a pretty good indicator that it was a good, that it was correct, was mostly what I felt when that name came was fear. Like a, oh no, kind of feeling. It felt like responsibility and a burden that I was not ready for. And that was true. I mean, I was not ready for it. I was on the edge of ready for it. But it took a couple months. And some conversations with people I trust, love, respect. Before I could start to embrace loving silence as my name. And so you can see how it would be very easy for the neurotic self to dismiss something like that, because it didn't come in a shower of good feelings. It didn't come with like party balloons and a choir of kazoos playing and, God reaching down and saying, "Here you are, my son." Yeah, and instead I felt fear and almost a terror. So that's sort of that's an example of, truth doesn't always feel good. And, feeling good isn't always a great indicator of what's true. And there's been plenty of times where truth has been very uncomfortable for me. Surrender has been something I do in the midst of holding on for dear life. Spirit is Spirit has often moved for me more quickly than my mind and my neurotic self is really quite comfortable with. And And sometimes there's often a lag, a period where our mind's little self is playing catch up with a decision, a revelation of spirit. So quietness is certainly an aspect of the natural state for me. And flow. Flow is another aspect. And I think we've all experienced flow to some degree. I used to ask I taught a meditation class many years ago, and I used to ask students about when they experienced flow in their lives. And you get a whole range of answers, right? I remember one guy saying, well, it's when I'm dirt biking, right? So maybe you've dirt biked, maybe you haven't. Probably, not everyone has. But you can imagine maybe riding a bicycle, right? And then take that up a couple notches, right? You've got an engine with lots of horsepower, and all you have to do is twist the throttle a little bit, just a little rolling action in your wrist, and all of a sudden you're moving at 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. Whoa, and then all of a sudden there's this big dirt hill, and you're flying off the top of this dirt hill, and you're in the air. You gotta land. Oh no, there's another twist here, a turn here, you gotta turn real fast. Oh, and put on the brakes, because there's an unexpected turn there. So not a lot of time for thinking. And if you're not in a state of flow, you're probably going to crash very quickly. It's a pretty good answer, right? For a flow state. Flow could also be really simple. When I take a walk in the woods, I experience flow. Could be even more simple than that, right? I mean, watching television might be a little bit like a flow state, right? We're not really thinking about ourselves. We're immersed in an experience. We are feeling in response to that experience. It's grabbing up our attention. And flow in some ways can be a good indicator of our alignment with what's natural for us. Some of us learn to be in flow in some areas of our lives better than others, right? Work for me is actually a pretty easy, natural place to be in flow. I work with my hands. And it can be pretty easy for me to sort of drop into that flow at work. I'm painting this thing. There's this motion. Back and forth into the paint can and back and forth. I'm doing some carpentry. Doing some plumbing, some electrical, whatever it is. Takes a good connection with my body, with my senses. And then we may also have some areas of our lives where we are not in flow at all. For me, relationship, not a flow state for a long time. Parenting, not a flow state for a long time. And so there's really not much concern for the places we know how to flow. Right? We know how to do it there. Where the rubber hits the road is in the difficult places, the places that pull us out of flow. So for me, it's a big red flag in the area of relationship, right? Hey now, something's not right here. This deserves my attention. Maybe even some effort. Parenting, right? Parenting, I found myself all blocked up because of my past. Turns out it's not about my kid. The reason I can't flow in as a parent it's not something I haven't learned necessarily. It's because I haven't really dealt with my childhood. And so when I encounter my child, it brings up my past and discomfort, old beliefs, sort of unexamined traumas, my relationship with my sort of inner child, if you will, all that baggage gets in the way of me flowing there and really being fully present, being a parent with ease. Yeah, so flow. Quietness. And let me also say this, flow does not always mean movement. You know, we tend to associate flow with movement. And sometimes flow very naturally leads to stillness or rest. And it's not always apparent at the beginning. What we tend to find as we become more natural is that action and flow can come right out of silence and stillness. Just as these words come out of silence and stillness, different than that neurotic energy, which is like, oh, I gotta tell them about this, and oh, if I don't explain this, this is not gonna make any sense at all. And oh, geez, how do we wrap this all up into a nice, big, neat package? No, let's make it a small package, which really, really makes sense and is just logical from beginning to end. Oh, and let's do it so that they really like me too at the same time. That sounds great. Yeah. They should like me. And whatever it is we're doing here, it should be a really big hit. Just the best thing since sliced bread. Sliced bread must have been a really big deal in order to in order for that saying to have survived as long as it has. I worked in a bakery, and we had a bread slicer. It was a complicated machine, I guess, in the sense that it had lots of parts. But really, it was just a bunch of blades that moved, a bunch of bread knives that moved backwards and forwards and sliced the bread while holding the bread in place. So it doesn't seem that wild, but yeah. Where the fuck was I? Okay. Yeah, so, this very action is not about like, oh, I gotta go find where I was now. This action, that breath, that was a return, a a return to silence, a listening to the silence. And action flows, can flow right out of silence. Whether that action is building a house, or doing the dishes. For me, learning to move from silence was a lot of doing the dishes. Yeah, because because another aspect, a really fun one. A really fun aspect of the natural state is besides quietness, besides flow, it tends to be practical as hell. Right? And so many, many, many times in my life, when I sat down to meditate because I was disturbed about one thing or another, and I allowed that thing to arise in consciousness and saw it and yada yada. Kind of sat there for maybe a minute or two afterwards, just kind of making sure, like, yeah, we're done with that thing. Okay, it's complete. And the very next thing that would happen is I'd find my ass lifting up off the couch and my legs walking. Oh, okay, here we go. We're doing the dishes. Because, of course, I had not done the dishes. And, yeah, the natural state is practical as all get out. It tends to not do the big dramatic thing. If the details of our lives, the small things, aren't taken care of. And it turns out that's a great thing, because Our lives consist of a whole lot of small things for the most part. The rocket ship to the moon that I'm building in my backyard can wait, it turns out, until the dishes are done. The bed is made, I brushed my teeth. Yeah, it's just has a different natural state has a different set of concerns than the neurotic self. And that can be very disappointing to the neurotic self. I want to build the rocket ship. And because the rocket ship is what's going to fix my life. The rocket ship is what's going to get me the love I never had. The rocket ship is gonna fill that big empty hole in my stomach. So we could call that aspect simple, practical. It's always about the here and now. And it has a tendency to move at a speed now I'm going to contradict myself. Here we go. Earlier I said spirit moves quickly. Sometimes spirit does move quickly. Certainly it can make leaps much more quickly than the mind can, than the neurotic self can. And it can also move quite slowly. And we could call this kind of aspect, like the speed of life. And maybe you've noticed that the speed of life and the speed of the neurotic self are a bit different, right? Neurotic self's gotta catch that plane, gotta do it, achieve that thing, not tomorrow, today. There's when you put a whole lot of neurotic selves together, you know, you got cities and buildings reaching into the sky, and there's a whole lot of more buying things, making things that we don't really need. You know, that are not probably not going to be the thing that makes us happy. Got to get that new car, that new face, that new thing, and do it fast. There's the neurotic self. That's where the rat race comes from. And then you walk out into a park or the woods. Somewhere out into nature, and there's a different speed. The speed of nature. And even when it's crunch time in nature, right? Like, oh, it's fall. The squirrels got to gather up those nuts and put them away for winter. There's still something unhurried about it, right? Okay, I got this nut, and I'm just going to sit here for a minute and look around. And I'm going to scurry over here with it, and then I'll pause again and just kind of look around and take things in. Even when it's kind of in a hurry, it's still very unhurried. You don't see the Amazon fulfillment center mindset out in the natural world. You know, that deer, they're eating, but they're also looking around. They're not really running from one plant to the next. There might be a flurry of activity and then a pause, stillness, a kind of reflectiveness. And it's never happening quite as fast as the neurotic self would like. Maybe you've lived in a city and a town. You can feel the difference in speed between the two. I know when I'm driving in New York City, I'm on high alert because it's highly unpredictable what's going to happen. And, everybody's in a race to the next traffic light. And it's a high stakes, cutthroat race. Very different from the experience of driving in a small town. People tend to not be in quite such a hurry. The crows are really going at it out there. So speed. Speed is an aspect of the natural state. We'll call it the speed of life. I was waiting. Oh yeah, there's definitely. Oh geez, yeah. So there's another aspect we could talk about, and I laughed because it's. I guess I kind of thought, it's like such a big subject that the idea of kind of putting it on this talk seems silly, but here we go. Love, right? Love is an aspect. Lovingness is an aspect of the natural state. Yeah. Where do you begin with such a such a topic? Yeah. Course in Miracles just kind of says, well, love. We're not even going to go there. We're not going to talk about that. It's too it's too big to talk about, too hard to describe. So, no thanks. And that book is like really long. It's like 2,000 pages of very fine print. And they don't want to do it there. Like, why do I have to do it? Jeez. Well, love is love has very little to do with what I thought it was, what I was told it was. What culture told me it was. It's hard to talk about because it's paradoxical through and through. It's not, definitely has very little to do with gushy feelings for me. Very little to do with obsession, sleepless nights, losing oneself, only being able to think about another. These are all things we're sold that love is. So I used to think of it as a feeling. And sometimes it shows up with a feeling. And feeling is a very small aspect of love. Like a grain of sand on a beach. And similarly, I think I used to think that love meant protecting someone from pain. You love someone, you protect them from pain. And can't say I'm holding on to that idea anymore. I often wouldn't want, I wouldn't want to rob someone of a painful experience that they need to have. So it's not about feelings, it's not about protecting someone from a feeling. Jeez. lot to say about love. Love is. I mean, it is. It's woven right into the fabric of what we are. When the clouds get dissolved enough, we start to experience it. Love for people. Love for life. Life loves life. It's what is calling us all the time. It may not seem like it. When the pain is strong, it certainly may not seem like it. And yet, it is. It's calling us. It's the very impulse behind awakening. It's what keeps calling us to awakeness. And greater and greater freedom, consciousness. It's the impulse to share this with you. And it's part of the mystery of what we are. And that's enough for today.